Hello, and welcome to a steely episode of the Drywall Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Harmon. With us today, John Galterio of Creative Wall Finishes out of Montrose, Colorado. I first met John a couple of years ago when he called about color matching a beautiful dark color for Fresco Harmony, which has quickly become one of our most purchased custom colors. We talk about Fresco Harmony and a lot about plaster.
If you were to do like if you were to do like a textured plaster surface and turn around and squirt regular water into that and it would catch all the cat faces, there's always that chance of you getting like milk in the cat faces and being lighter from when you're spraying the bottle with the clear water, just water. Now I've always kicked it up. I'm always like a math professor. I try to mess with stuff. 90% of the time my stuff doesn't work, but 10% of the time it does. And I like to put the pigment that I use to mix the color in the plaster. I will take that out of the bucket that I mix the colorant with the water, and I put it in the squirt bottle, and I use that, and I can make all sorts of modeling. Now, I haven't done that yet with yours with Fresco.
Yeah, that would work.
And I'm getting ready to see if I could do the same process with just getting one of your Fresco bottles, putting no drywall mud in it, putting a 5-gallon bucket of water, putting that in there, putting the squirt bottle in there, and squirting it on the wall and doing the same process as I do with plaster to do it with Fresco, just to see if it works.
I'll bet you it would. Because your pure color, and the colors are water based, so they're gonna work well with water. Your color is going to be richer when you you sort of squirt it and then trowel it off.
Yep.
Neat. That would be I haven't done that myself. That would be a cool experiment. We get deep into the weeds with plaster versus Fresco Harmony, and I really appreciate John's plaster knowledge, and I know you will too. The month of August on the Drywall Podcast was brought to you by the Drywall Supply Yard in Montrose, Colorado. If you're interested in sponsoring a month of the Drywall Podcast, feel free to email me directly at info@frescoharmony.com to discuss. The Drywall Podcast was also brought to you by Fresco Harmony, making walls better since 2004. New episodes of the Drywall Podcast can be listened to every Friday on your favorite platforms such as Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also YouTube. But for now, John Galterio of the famous Galterio Steel Color on the 63rd episode of the Drywall Podcast. Let's get into it. Hello. We got John Galterio of Creative Wall Finishes out of Montrose, Colorado on the Drywall Podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You've been on the radar for a little while. We've known each other. Gosh, I was in Lake City, Colorado when you called. Why did you call again? You had a big job, or I forget.
I had a big job, and I didn't want to. It was just one person, and I'm used to running in, diamond interior finish and stuff like that. And I kept seeing your stuff on YouTube, and I was like, man, I'd really like to see this stuff. I mean, one person can run it. This is pretty efficient, and it can be productive. And I was like, man, and I'm getting a little bit older, so this is probably right up my alley. So that's why I called you up, and I was like, man, I want to check this stuff out.
That's interesting because a lot of plaster guys are real sort of, you do plaster, you're proud of the plaster. It's like all you want to do. And sometimes we'll get maybe, the plaster guys kind of looking down their nose at a color joint compound system because it's not, it's not traditional Venetian, all
Correct.
of that stuff. Walk me through your background real quick in Venetian plaster, because you're a drywall finisher, right?
I'm a drywall finisher that started out. Actually, I'm a drywall finisher that started out doing stucco, doing EFIS, and then turned
Okay.
around and got into with a bunch of guys that did interior plaster, and started doing interior plaster. So, and then like all the other finishes came later, the Venetian and stuff like that. But it was mostly diamond. And when I first started, it was a base coat finish. Um,
Okay.
it wasn't a veneer. It was a base coat finish. It was two coats over a base coat, and
L-
then they seal it with
let's let's talk about that a little bit. Veneer base coat finish. Walk me through the prep involved in this type of plaster that you were doing. Are you prepping regular drywall, or are you using a special board?
It was right back. I think when I started. I started like out in '92, and I got here up in Colorado and started in '93. And those guys were using just regular old. I think blue board was just catching on. The blue board
Okay.
was catching on, and they were doing back then. They were doing the mesh with the base coat, and they would go through and they do all that stuff. Then they would put two coats of diamond over the top, and then
Okay.
turn around, and then after they were done, they would oak on it and stuff like that. They'd integrate the color in the plaster, kind of almost just like the fresco, but just in almost actually the same process, just a little bit different. They would
Yeah.
actually put the water in a 5 gallon bucket with whatever it takes to make a 5 gallon deal of pigment, and they would put it in the water,
Okay.
and then they would make it where you can mix any amount at any given time, instead of using, okay, this is what we need for a half a bucket, or this is what we need for a full bucket. So
Okay.
that's how stuff started out. So, but
And
yeah.
that's half bucket versus full bucket because of the setting time. You have a certain amount of time to work with the medium before it goes off.
Correct. And when I mean, you could, if you have small sets, you could do accelerators and stuff like that, and retarders and stuff. But I never really got into that stuff. We just had enough people to run the big runs. But you would have to have a large amount of people to do like a big, huge run. If you had like a 20 sheet ceiling lid, you would have to have anywhere from 4 to 6 guys to run that thing.
What
So it was pretty
why
intense.
is that?
Um, it's because the way, so you first coat it, and by the time it starts setting up again, you have to have the ability to keep running that wet edge all the way through to the end of the ceiling, and then fall back and have enough guys to second coat, and then turn around and water trowel, then soft trowel, then hard trowel. So if you had a 20 sheet lid and you had something that went off in 45 minutes, you would lose the ceiling if you didn't have enough people. So that's what would
Interesting.
happen.
And then
Yep.
you still have it's pretty laborious. I would assume the blue board versus regular drywall. Isn't there kind of a difference there with labor intensive
Yeah,
and
yeah.
also cost, right?
Costs. So what I found out too, even before I started, they used to hang the sheetrock reverse. They used to brown board it. They would actually flip
Okay,
the sheetrock around, and they would
cool.
brown board it. But that was like ways before I even came in. I'm hearing that was like in the '70s and '80s and stuff like they were doing stuff like that. And
Why would they flip the board?
so I think it has something to do with like the pores and the the brown paper in the back would suck up and adhere to the plaster a lot better than the white paper, and there was no recess on the back. So
Oh,
yeah, there was no recess on the back, so they would just mesh it and they would bond it, and they would turn around and they'd run their plaster over the top of it. So yeah, that's how that stuff would work. But as time went on, then they did the taping and one coating over regular type X or ceiling board or anything, the ultralight. You could do that over that. And they would tape and one coat it and turn around, and they'd bond it. And some places would want you bond and prime to shut down the substrate so you wouldn't get any flashing.
Okay.
I think that's why the Fresco Harmony is such a good product, is because you when you put the drywall mud over the whole thing of the sheetrock, there's no flashing. And I think the flashing comes
Right.
from when something dries quick and you see the bands, you can see the butts, things like that. So I think when someone skims it with regular drywall mud, you don't get flashing. It's the whole
Interesting.
thing. The substrate is sealed, it's done. And I think that's why the Fresco comes in so handy when it comes to that
Weird.
stuff. It is weird.
I have to say that's like a happy accident because that was not my intention. We were, full coating like in Crested Butte, Colorado. We were doing the
Okay.
base coat texture with a pool trowel over the whole surface, and that was a good finish because you didn't really have to finish the drywall, level 2 or 3, maybe light
All the way.
sand, and then your angles just tape, and then because you're pulling out a full coat,
Mhm.
if you finish your angles properly. um, that's interesting. Very
Mhm.
cool. Very cool. So
Yeah.
you were seeing like the advantages from a plaster standpoint of the Fresco Harmony, provided it's strong. And granted, it's not as strong as a Venetian plaster finish, but there's also advantages to the malleability, I feel like, of the mud because you're not battling like taking the tape off.
And
Um,
that's correct. That's
Hairline
correct.
cracks, like things like
Yep.
that, patchability, stuff like that.
And I think harder the material and harder the material, I think you have a chance of, when it's that thin, a harder material, it's going to crack. You always have that, and you have that with drywall mud. It's so porous, and the plaster's so dense, and that's what happens. You get cracks in a plaster, and then you got to turn around. Either you have to cut it out, skim it, tape it, faux paint it, or you
Okay.
rerun the whole wall.
Okay.
So the things with the Fresco is like you're way ahead of the game. You could patch with this stuff. You can't patch plaster. The only way you can patch it is taping it, and then putting, coating it, and then turn around and putting up and faux paint it, unless you're going to rerun the whole wall. That's
And just to be clear for our listening audience, there is with any multicolored surface, there's challenges with patching because I've also come into situations where the patch will flash a little bit and you have to sort of faux out the edge with a match paint.
mm-hmm,
In with darker colors. With lighter colors, they seem to patch fairly well, and you can like
mm-hmm,
blend the edge with just your sanding off the all-purpose mud like with your
mm-hmm,
hand and just kind
mm-hmm,
of blending that way. Lighter colors, I feel like patch really well. And then if you have to reskim wall to wall, it's not
mm-hmm.
as big a deal because your all-purpose mud keeps in a bucket. You can bust out or mix another batch. It's
Yep.
whatever. It's $30, $40, whatever. It's not as big a deal. um that all kind of came later, all of those, like, and also color consistency as well. So I know getting color consistency with plaster is also can be challenging, right?
It can be. A lot of people used to take it straight out of they used to mix their colors right out of a carousel, a paint
Okay.
carousel, and to
Right.
shoot it right, just like paint into the plaster. And I always felt like that was never efficient, because you would have to, like I said, you would have to mix a certain amount, like half. This is what it takes to make half if you use that color. This is what it takes to make a full bucket. So you by putting the water into a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket, and then putting the pigment in there, and then turning it around and mix and boxing it, and then turn it around, you can mix eighth of a bucket, you can mix a quarter of a bucket, you mix a half a bucket, you can mix 3/4 of a bucket, and it's all the same color. So that's the cool thing about doing it that way. The other
Okay.
thing is when you do it that way, is what you're doing with the Fresco. You really, it's really hard to get a color very dark with diamond, with interior plaster. And because you'll get a lot of flashing, you'll get a lot of like, okay, this is way dark over here, this is monotone over here, this is light over here, and
Okay.
it just doesn't all fudge together quite well when you get a real dark color and you have to put that amount of pigment into a water bucket to make your plaster.
Okay, so you came to me though, and oddly enough, Galterio Steel, which is your color that was created a while ago. I think maybe you sent me a color swatch. You were like, "Hey, man, can you get a really dark black?" Your color was the first color that I mixed that required what we have now is a double color pack. So the Galterio Steel is a double color pack. I think it retails for 42 or something. It's like twice the amount of a regular color pack, but you're taking that much more color and mixing it with a bucket. And now we have several double color packs and even a 2 or 3 triple color packs. They're like a quart of like color.
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
So that was the tricky thing with and when I asked you that, because a lot of times everybody's going for this industrial, rustic, modern look, and they're wanting dark plaster. And really the only way that you was able to get that plaster, that color, was through like Venetian, was the actual Venetian. And for someone to say, hey, I want this with diamond, or I want this with like Fresco, I couldn't even fathom like putting pigment into a bucket of mud and saying, hey, I'm going to get this dark of a color consistency all the way through, because you cannot, it's hard to get that dark of a color like in regular diamond or anything like that. It's hard. You almost have to wash the wall. You have to actually, when you're putting it on, you have the actual pigment that you made the plaster with, and you're spraying it into the wall. So it's very hard to get that color like you got with Galterio Steel to be in the interior plaster.
Interesting.
Yeah,
because I've seen like and one limitation to Frescoes, I mean, really rich fire engine reds and like cobalt blues, like those. Like I've seen some gorgeous Venetian plasters with this like rich cobalt blues or purple. That's kind of challenging to get with Fresco Harmony. Just to be honest. We do have the Midnight Dave now. Black, I feel like we've sort of achieved. With the Midnight Dave, that's like a step richer than Galterio. I didn't think I could go that dark, because at a certain point your mud just gets saturated with the color and it stops like continuing to get richer. You just have, it's too much color, and it kind of, I feel like it messes up maybe the chemical makeup of the joint compound. The joint compound starts to react a little weird, but I haven't had any like adhesion issues, even with the triple color packs, or bonding issues or anything like that.
So you're saying that adhesion compared to like it being got so much pigment in it, it would be hard for it to adhere to like a drywall or a painted surface?
Sure. Or it messes up like the chemical makeup. But no, correct. I remember what I was going to say. The water, I've had people ask me like, oh, well, if I put more water in, because on the second coat, I tell people, well, thin down your mud for the second coat, and it's sort of easier to put on. It goes farther. You get more modeling. People have asked me, well, doesn't that affect the color? Now, with plaster, is extra water going to affect the color?
So like if you were to do like how would I say this? If you were to do like a textured plaster surface and turn around and squirt regular water into that, and it would catch all the cat faces, there's always that chance of you getting like milk in the cat faces and being lighter from when you're spraying the bottle with the clear water, just water. Now me, I've always kicked it up. I'm always like a math professor. I try to mess with stuff. 90% of the time my stuff doesn't work, but 10% of the time it does. And I like to put the pigment that I use to mix the color in the plaster. I will take that out of the bucket that I mix the colorant with the water, and I put it in the squirt bottle, and I use that, and I can make all sorts of modeling. Now, I haven't done that yet with yours with Fresco.
Yeah, that would work.
And I'm getting ready to see if I could do the same process with just using getting one of your Fresco bottles, putting no drywall mud in it, putting
Right.
a 5-gallon bucket of water, putting that in there, putting the squirt bottle in there, and squirting it on the wall and doing the same process as I do with plaster
Interesting.
to do it with the
Yeah.
Fresco, just to
To
see if it works.
I'll bet you it would. I'll bet you it would because that your color, your pure color, and the colors are water based, so they're gonna work well with water. Your color's going to be richer when you
Right.
like you sort of
Yes.
squirt it and then trowel it off.
Yep.
Neat.
Same
That would be
difference.
I haven't done that myself. That would be a cool experiment.
Now I've done. I've been watching you guys now on some of them, but what I've been doing is I've been using 2 colors at a time
Okay.
and not waiting until till the first coat fully dries. And I
Okay.
will go in with a second color. So what I did
Okay.
on one of my walls, I did Martina Storm on the back
Okay. Okay.
on the first coat, and then I turned around and I did Galterio Steel on the second coat with a hand texture. Let it set up a little bit. Then I turned around and I swirled all that in and knocked it down, and I meshed them both together. And so I have a high and a low with the
Yeah.
Martina in the back and the Galterio in the front.
Now
So and
I'll tell people when they want to do multicolor to do the dark color underneath because then that pushes through the lighter color over the
yep,
top. So
yep.
my recommendation is always, well, do a lighter color, like do the Martinez over the Galtiero because you're going to get those
Yep.
lines,
And
veins.
we've always done that too for like, we've done, cause we used to do that too with, interior plaster. We would actually do a one coat of one color and then turn around and put a hand texture over the top with a different color and then hand texture it and then turn around and get the same color from the first coat in the squirt bottle and then put it on the second color coat while we're knocking it down. So you could always mess with that stuff, and
Sure.
it's crazy. It's really never ending. It
Yeah.
just keeps going on. So, but yeah.
Yeah, you get into etching and
Hmm.
stenciling. And I mean, all the cool stuff they're doing with Venetian plaster stenciling, you can do all that with joint compound as well. And
Yep.
you can get the multi surfaces and colors and all of that. I try to keep it simple, but staying in the same vein of color, talking about color, and just sort of keeping it simple. You know, when a lot of people ask too, well, can you do like half a bottle? And I'm always like, well, no, not really, because you want that color consistency. But what you're doing is completely different. Now, what I would caution is if you're mixing the color in with I would even say like a gallon. You could do like a gallon of water and do
Hmm.
half, because the ratio I guess wouldn't matter at that point, but you want to make sure that your color, like almost like they call it a slurry, like when
Hmm.
you would mix all of that color into water, rinse out the bottle really good so you have color
Yep.
consistency in your water when you mix it. Like, okay, I'm going to do 2 gallons of water per one color pack. make sure that
Mm.
make sure your color consistency is there with your water so that you could duplicate that on a large surface. It's all about
Hmm.
color consistency. That was one thing that came about very quickly, hence the color pack.
Hmm.
And so if you're listening, if you're mixing the color pack in with a box of mud, you always use the full color pack. And people will say, oh, well, isn't that wasteful? It's like, yeah, but it's still only 35-40 bucks for a bucket of mud, a box of mud, and the color pack versus,
Yeah.
whatever with plaster, whatever you're paying, whatever's happening there.
Yeah. And the cool thing with plaster is once you mix it, you have to use it.
Right.
You can't put a lid on it and say, "Hey, I'm going to save this away for 6 months," and turn around and like, "Oh,
Right.
look, I'm going to reuse it." Or uh, the kids come over, the grandkids come
Yeah.
over, put a ding in the wall. You're calling somebody on the phone and going, "Hey, do you know how to patch plaster? Have you ever done it? Have you ever? I need it patched. I heard they faux paint it, you know." And
Yeah.
then you're talking hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars
Yeah.
to do walls in interior plaster. So
Yeah.
I think with the Fresco, and my thing is too is what I was gonna talk to you about is, um,
Yeah.
I have a lot of people hit me up to do patches on plaster and stuff.
Right.
And I was going to do because you use drywall mud anyway when you patch plaster.
Yep.
I was going to take that color of the plaster, hit you up and say, hey,
yes,
I need this color. So when I go to do my base coat, I don't have to do that much faux painting. So
yes.
Yeah. And it's because that fresco, when it's put in the mud and then you put it to a wall that's plastered, it almost looks the same. I mean, there's not much difference. The only difference is the modeling, which the modeling comes from plaster, is marble dust. You know, a lot of people think it's the lime, but that's the marble dust. It's the marble dust, and it's the colorant that you put in there. Because if you do regular white plaster with no pigment in it, and you go to hard trowel it, you hard trowel it good, you're gonna get a gray to a bluish color if you hard trowel your white plaster hard. So yeah, so you could actually get that color and then turn around, get the fresco, use it for a patch on for your base coat, for faux painting on your plaster.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then so it's saving them. They could actually do that instead of calling somebody up and say, "Hey, I need a faux painter." They could actually just use fresco over their plaster.
And I'll take it a step further. Like, I have done that, and it's Dyrene Candy and it's Westbrook Tan. Those two, Westbrook Tan was actually fashioned. That color was fashioned after a plaster wall here in Albuquerque. They wanted that plaster look. And I've used those two colors, Dyrene Candy, it's a light pink, and it's kind of like a salmon. And then the Westbrook Tan is a very tannish, light, kind of like a kind of yellowish a little bit, but you kind of get that, they call it red top or whatever, which you can't, the color, they get it from a different quarry. The color doesn't match now, or they don't offer it anymore. They've discontinued the color. It's like a nightmare. I have people coming to me asking for plaster patches, and I jack up the price. It's like, okay, and I just use the match paint of Westbrook Tan and Dyrene Candy. I use those two muds to patch it. I use the faux finishing, and then I use like the gloss sealer to pull that sheen out to try to match.
Oh, use the gloss sealer. I use
the sealer as well to get that sheen, and you can kind of steel trowel that and burnish it up a little bit. But if you're quasi artistic, and you have a good eye and you faux finished a little bit, you can definitely use Fresco Harmony to patch plaster.
Oh yeah.
Which is what we're talking about.
I was sitting there one day and I'm like, man, I bet you Nick can match this, and just I could actually use this as a base coat. Then I wouldn't have to faux paint that much.
Correct.
So, and that's the thing, because faux painting could, at the end of a job, on a plaster job, after everybody's gone in there, because and a lot of people don't know this, but pretty interior plaster guys are really second from the last people that go into a job if it's done correctly. We need our cabinets in, we need the base in. We need the case in, unless it's kerf. If it's kerf, all that kerf, and there's no base. They put L metal on the bottom and stuff like that. Because a lot of people are going to that. But I haven't seen, and I would like to do. I've done a couple of plaster jobs like that where there's no trim in the whole house, none.
Okay.
The only thing that I would want to do is maybe do that around square kerf around doors, on interior doors, and see if I can get away with it. And what I was thinking was almost using a base as with some, now this is crazy, this might sound crazy, but get some 90 minute and turn around and put the fresco in the 90 minute, mix it up with the water, and then try it and put that on as your kerf, so you have really, really durable corners, and then turn around and put a second coat over the top of it with regular drywall mud. So there's a lot of things I would like to try with it that I haven't tried yet. I know it could happen.
I feel like that's weight, just like with Venetian plaster. So if you're weighing out your quick set, okay, I've got however many pounds of quick set powder in the bucket, then or a gallon of quick set, you can dump that in. But as long as it's measured and you use, the same amount of color pack, you're going to get you're going to get that color with the quick set. I tell people, we're talking sort of advanced, Fresco Harmony or whatever, but like, if now you're back to a plaster type finish. Correct. When you're using, because now you're measuring and you're getting color inconsistency and things like that. I've always just kind of like, my shtick has been like affordability and speed. Like, let's do the whole house. Let's do the whole room. Why do an accent wall when you can like skim out the room 3 times in 3 days, gravy, and you're charging a cheaper amount, and with the prices of paint, it's like, well, just do Fresco Harmony. We'll skim out these walls. There are texture paint. Doesn't matter. We don't have to prime it, or we don't have to, skim it out, which you would need to do anyways with joint compound. Like, put the color in the joint compound, make it look like plaster. Client's happy. You're making extra money. I'm selling product. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that sort of thing.
Yeah. I always, when I go in, I always tell them guys, even when I was doing old, before I quit and I went back into doing this stuff from when I left Vegas. So I was in Vegas for 10 years. I was out in Colorado for 20, and I had my own business for about 12 or 13 years. I would go up to a client and say, okay, I'm going to do interior plaster. I'm going to do these ceilings. I'm going to do these walls for the same price, but that's an accent wall. So I would do that. And then they would like, hey man, can you do the fireplace? Right. I said, yeah, I'll do the fireplace for nothing. And it'll save you $4,000 from not doing the stonework on it. And they're like, oh, let's do it, Right. So I would do that. And then it multiplied by then. And then by the time that was going on, I was like, hey, I'll take the paint money. I take the texture money off the job. All you're out is the base case to paint the base case and the doors. And you can pretty much do that yourself, and you have plaster. Yeah. But now with this Fresco, this Fresco is a whole different ball game, because you're actually even doing the job faster with Fresco than you would with interior. Interior plaster, people they freak when they hear the time frame. You're like, what? How long does that take? Right. But with Fresco, it's just like if you were hand texturing, doing double hand texture in a house. So
yeah, we just did a project for a builder. We did the entire living room, master bedroom, hallway, kitchen, all the common areas. It was probably $12K, right around there, maybe $15K. We did the plaster in 3 weeks, and that was on the long end. Like, my guys working 6-hour days. All we're doing is going over the level 2, tape and 2-coat, no sand drywall with the Fresco system. Yep. The builder was saving on, that amount of work. And then they did traditional Venetian plaster on 2 fireplaces. That plaster guy was there for 3 months. No joke, on the 2 fireplaces. Yep. And we did probably 40 times as much Fresco Harmony in a fraction of the time.
And you're going to that. And the problem with that is if you do true Venetian plaster, you have to do a level 5. People don't understand that. You have to you have to get to a level 5 even before you apply your 3 to 5 coats.
Why is that?
Venetian. Because Venetian is such a, like the second coat of Fresco?
Yeah.
When you put the second coat of Fresco on? Yeah. Every coat of Venetian is trying to add depth. Hence, the walls in Venice are 18 inches thick because of the canals. And true Venetian plaster is trying to add depth. That's what you're trying to add. Yeah. So that's what you're trying to do, is add depth with the modeling when you're doing I know people that put 3 coats on, which you shouldn't. You can get away with it, but they do recommend anywhere from 4 to 5. But you can do 3. Yeah. Okay. But it has to be a level surface, because you're pulling something out of a can that's only a gallon can. That can goes so far because it's put on so thin at a time each time. Okay. Each process. All right. But what you're trying to do is add depth. Is what you're trying to do. Like the second coat of Fresco, you would have to do that like 3 to 5 times over a level 5 surface. Right. To be cool.
I think the depth too can come with the Fresco Harmony when you go to the colored sealer. So then you're getting like these, we offer 4 different colors of sealer now. But that's just to make it efficient for the end user. You do a light color, you go over it with like the smoke sealer, and you're creating like a transparent, translucent sort of, surface very simply. Like you can
Yes.
take it from like, because the other sort of issue or, people are like, well, it's more mellow. Like Fresco Harmony is more mellow than Venetian plaster. And it is, you can create depth in different ways. I've found that the chillness of Fresco Harmony is a selling point as well. It's not
Well,
overbearing.
and you hit the nail on the head, because that's true. Because if you go to people that will look at like diamond interior and they go, oh, I don't like all the modeling, I don't like all that stuff. Is there any way to tone it down? And to tone down diamond interior plaster is really hard to tone it down, because
Okay.
especially if you have a long run, everybody's strokes are different. You get somebody in there doing different strokes, and you're trying to do a monotone finish with diamond veneer. It's almost impossible. You can do it with the lighter colors, but when you get to the darker colors, it's almost impossible to do.
It just
So
has, and similar to Fresco, it just has its own look. People are like, oh, well, can you get the shiny burnished plaster with Fresco? And I'm like, no, it's its own thing. You can get what you get. Make a sample always. It's an interesting conversation. I mean, I like it, and I like that your plaster background. We can, get more in depth with colors and systems and things like that.
Well, I was just for you to say that, to go on to that. Well, you were asking about, because a lot of plasters, they don't like to talk about, oh, I'm a plaster and I'm not going to use this product. The problem with that is it's mostly usually, and I'm like, I mean, I'm older now, but I'm not as old as those old guys, but
Yeah.
they're stuck in their ways, and
Yeah.
they don't want to evolve. There's a box, and they're going to stay in the box. They're not going to get outside the box.
Sure.
And I'm the younger generation that's like, hey, let's try this. Let's do this. Let's see if this works.
Yeah.
Those guys are like, nah, it's this or nothing. And I know a lot of guys that are diamond guys that don't like Venetian. And then I know Venetian guys that are painters that don't like diamond because they can't spread diamond, So
Sure.
there's that hate and discontent towards everybody. I could do this, you can't do that. And it's like,
Yeah.
and my thing is, and I'm not shooting my own horn, but I can do all those things.
Sure.
And if there's something that's easy and it could be done by actually like a homeowner and it's almost foolproof,
Why not?
why wouldn't you want to use it? And I'm not trying to cut me out of not working or doing like coming in and doing stuff on their house when the house needs to be fixed or remodeled. These homeowners could actually do Fresco. I mean, if you really want to, I mean, there's really no wrong way to do it. I remember asking you like maybe 2 years ago, hey, could I roll this stuff on first coat? And you're like, yeah. So I rolled it on.
Yeah.
And I put it on second coat, and it's like I just saved my shoulder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So a homeowner can do this stuff. I mean, it's a good product, man. I really like it.
Thank you.
And if you can see in the background, I got Burns charcoal. So
Nice. Yeah, it's Burns charcoal is kind of a lighter, bluer gray, very pretty. We've got like 3 bluish grays, and we have 3 gray grays. Very cool conversation though. This is how the podcast sort of started, was talking to dudes like you or regular, drywall guys that we would just sort of get in these long-winded conversations about texture. If you're texturing a whole wall, well, why not dump a color pack in and try out some Fresco or whatever? It's a cool conversation. And I was just talking with Cam Brown, It's You Man Cam, this morning about even on the influencer side, like doing Fresco Harmony adds a whole new realm of possibility for even like video content that's interesting, versus just another, review of the box or something like that. It's really good content, if you're trying to bolster your social media content or whatever. Very cool. But let's get into how you got into the trade. I mean, are you first generation?
I'm actually first generation. Well, it's either the four I got broken in by. What is it? Your dad, your uncle, your brother-in-law, or your brother?
Yeah.
I got broken in by my brother-in-law. So I was in Las Vegas.
Well, real quick, there's a fifth of like just the people that sort of are attracted to the mud, which I fall into that category. I'm first generation, and like I just like the medium, which is kind of a weird one, but there's a lot of us out there that like just are drawn to drywall, finishing.
Yeah, and I loved it. I mean, so I first saw it when I was a kid. I had one of the neighbors come with my brother's neighbor came over. He was a drywaller. And I was like 8 years old, and I was like, man, this is cool. I've never seen anything like this. So when I met my brother-in-law, I was like 12 years old, and it was in Las Vegas. And I got to sand, detail, and mix mud with a mixing paddle, with the mixer. And I weighed
a stomper?
The stomper. I weighed like 75 pounds, and and all I did all day for these guys. And they're running the bazooka through these big, huge houses in Vegas and stuff. And, down there in Spanish Trails. I mean, it just had to be like 87, I think 86, 87. And then when I hit 17, I was full-time from my junior year to my senior year. All through my senior year, I was full-time. And turned around, graduated out in Las Vegas, turned around, moved out here in 93 to Montrose. And I started from there. I was doing drywall. Then I got into EFIS. And then from EFIS, I got into hard coat stucco. And then from hard coat stucco, I got into interior plaster. And then after that, I've been going ever since. So.
And that was just huge out in Vegas too, right? You were probably laying out a bunch of stucco and plaster.
So when I was back there, I went back for 10 years. I was out here for 20, and I went back in 2013. And this is what I tell everybody about drywallers. Drywallers are really resilient. So I got into pools down there with the mud. I mean, if you know one mud, you could always learn how to do another mud.
Sure.
And that's what I always say. And I started doing pools. I started doing pool decks with concrete overlay, and then I got into epoxies. I got into stuff like that. Then I got into showers for concrete overlay, which got me into tile because I was doing pools with the tile. Okay. So with drywall, if it has to be straight, level, and you can read a tape measure and you could use mud, there's really not anything that a drywaller can't do. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, but I'm saying that to all the drywallers out there.
Yeah.
Like, we're unique, I know we got a bunch of memes and stuff on Instagram and stuff like that. Like, we're mess ups and deviants and all that stuff. But
we are. It's okay. It's okay, John. There's a lot of derelicts in this trade.
There is. I mean, and I get it now. And I'm like, I watch YouTube, and I got some of these guys on there that's like, hey, this is how you do it. And I'll just turn around and I'll hit the like button, just to be nice sometimes. And I don't want to go and say, hey, you're doing it wrong. Everybody has a way to do it. But when these guys never learned from somebody or got broke in by somebody, and then they turn around and tell a homeowner, hey, this is how you do it. And then they have guys like us go in there, and they're like, you're charging me what to fix what? And it's like, don't listen to that YouTube certified stuff. Listen to somebody that's trained, that learned through the ranks. They got yelled at, you know what I mean? So it's one of those things. But we're persistent people and do different things. And I think we're a good part of the trade of all the construction trades is drywallers, So I love it, man.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So when was the point in time at which you branched out onto your own? Can we talk about that transition a little bit?
So I was doing, it had to be like 2005. I branched out on my own. I was running I was pretty much like a supervisor for a stucco company, and here in Montrose, and I wanted to go back to doing drywall and stuff.
How'd you get to Montrose from Vegas? How did that happen?
So my brother-in-law was born and raised raised out in Montrose. Okay. That met my sister. And when I was 13, I came out here and visited. And I was like, when I turn 18, I'm going to move out here. So the day after I graduated high school, I came out here. I had my bags packed.
What'd you like about Montrose?
Man, it was different. It was so because Vegas is a weird town. To most people, they love it. They love it. I tried it again. I left when I was 18. I went back when I was like 37, 36. I went back and I went for 10 years. The daughter graduated from UNLV out there and went to school out there. And I decided to come back because I knew it wasn't for me. I knew it was like, hey, this is done. I need to go back home. I miss the small town stuff.
Yeah.
I miss the mountains. I want to go back home. And so that's the reason why I came back out here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And that's when 2005, when you first went to Montrose, that's kind of when you started your own gig?
Well, I came out here in 93 from graduating high school. And then in 2005, I went and I started my own gig, and I started doing, I actually started out doing drywall. I wasn't doing any stucco, and everybody knew me from doing stucco, but I actually started out doing drywall. I got broken first doing drywall. Then, like I said, the EFIS came, all that other stuff, the hard coat and the plaster.
Sure.
So I broke out on my own in 2005, and then I ended it out here like in 2013. I left 2012, 2013. Then started my business in Vegas for a little bit, and then did pools, and I did a lot of custom stuff. I actually did, because it's so hard to compete with drywallers and stucco guys out there. It was so hard. So that's when I got pools, and I started doing all the, the custom stuff. And I found out that's what I like to do more, is the custom stuff. And that's why I like the Fresco so much, is because you could be so creative with it and do different things with it. So that's why I love it so much. So, but yeah, and that's how it started. And then now, after 2 years of not doing anything, I worked for somebody, and then I turned around and said, hey, I want to go back on my own. And I started back on my own again. So it's been a whirlwind. It's been fun. It's when it's in your blood, you just can't get it out.
Yeah. How's it been going back to work on your own now? I mean, have you had challenges drumming up business? And why drywall? Why not stucco in Montrose or whatever?
Well, the stucco, I do want to do the stucco, but the only problem with doing the stucco is this stuff is seasonal here, and I'm getting old, and I'm like, I really don't want a tent in the wintertime. I want to do maybe 1 to 3 seasons, maybe spring, fall, maybe not even do fall, because you can't catch it in time, and you got to start tenting. But spring, you can be going, hey, let's wait 2 or 3 weeks and turn around, and let's wait 2 or 3 weeks and let's start your project.
And if you're listening, we're talking about temperature in Montrose, Colorado. We're talking about extreme cold, like where the snow comes in, and it's like, for products to go off properly, they have to be heated. The tent is an enclosure around the structure that enables the stucco guys to do their job in the winter when it's ridiculously cold. I like drywall in Crested Butte because it was like, we're indoors, there's got to be heat. That's like in the contract, so we were always warm. In the summer, you're always cool, because you're out of the sun,
Telluride's that way. That's why I like Telluride. Yeah. I don't like driving the 65 miles every day one way, and it was just like, I'm tired of this. I don't want to do this no more.
So you're driving from Montrose to Telluride?
Yes, every day.
Oh my God.
130 miles a day, 5 days a week.
That's a lot.
And it's hard. It's hard to get a full day in, it's hard to wrap your brain around it when you're going like, okay, I wake up at a certain amount of time in the morning. I cut my gym time out. I can't go to the gym. The only way I can go to the gym is if I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, go to the gym, and then turn around, and I got to be on the road by 6. And it makes it hard, because by the time you get to the job, and you only want to work 6 hours a day, and people are like, man, you're only working 6 hours a day. It's like, you drive 15 hours a week, and you tell me if you like it or not. So,
well, and if you're listening too, Colorado's kind of that way. I worked with dudes that lived in between Gunnison and Montrose, and they would drive like an hour every day to Crested Butte to work one way. And that's just kind of the way Colorado is. There's a lot of like
Yes.
distance, and I mean, there wasn't a drywall supply yard in Gunnison, so you would have to go and get your materials from Montrose. Now I
There
do
is
believe
now.
the drywall supply yard has a location in Gunnison, which is nice for the Crested Butte dudes. But the Colorado is just kind of that way, challenging to work in,
Yeah.
unless you're like me, you lived in Crested Butte, worked for a company in Crested Butte, and that was still sporadic. This was 19, 20 years ago,
Yeah, and that's the thing. But I Crested Butte is a cool area. It's just one
Yeah.
of those areas that's just Crested Butte reminds me of Ouray in a way, like Ouray,
Yeah.
Colorado.
Yeah.
Telluride is a different animal. I mean, that's
Yeah.
you're dealing with. There's very few far in between like down to earth people in Telluride.
Right.
That
Right.
have those houses up on the ski runs, and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
now don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they don't exist, but they're few
No.
far in between.
Yeah, and we're talking about the word I think is aspenization. They're these ski towns in Colorado that have become
Correct.
commercialized. Aspen,
Correct.
Breckenridge,
See,
Alden Vale.
in the early '90s, or mid '90s, I lived in Silverthorne for a year, and I worked all through Frisco, Dillon,
Okay,
Breckenridge, Copper Mountain. I worked in Vale,
nice.
Beaver Creek. I worked in all those areas, and it was cool because I was younger and I got to experience it. But if I was to do it now, I wouldn't even choose to do it. I'd be like, no, I don't want to do it. There's no way I'm
Okay.
not doing it. But
Well,
those are some
oddly
cool
enough,
areas.
Eagle, Out West Drywall Supply, and Eagle
Yep.
and Glenwood Springs has been doing well with Fresco because of the Aspen Vale, those markets. These old salty plaster guys. I went up and did a training in Glenwood Springs, and there was 30 people there, and we have projects in Aspen now.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think that's the problem with. And I'm not trying to say this in a bad way, but that's the problem with Telluride, because it's such a tight knit, and that's where I got broke in doing plaster, was Telluride, and
Okay.
it's tough, man. These guys do not want to conform to any way. They want to keep what they're doing. They don't want to change. They don't want to
Yeah.
evolve.
Yeah.
And I'm more of the younger generation of plaster guys that are doing it now. And I don't mean to be messed up or nothing. It's like, why wouldn't you want to like put more things, notches on your belt to learn and to have?
Sure.
If you wanted to go to, so these guys will stay, and like you said, these guys will go up and work up there for 6 months, 7 months, turn around, have no plaster work, and just sit on their hands. The
Yeah.
way I think is I want to stay consistent. I want to keep going. I'm going to learn me something else, because if that dies out, I can go down into Montrose and I can go push Fresco.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I'm getting ready to do. That's what I want to do. I want
Yeah,
to push
just people that want their existing painted texture covered up,
covered up.
or if you're doing remodel work, you can be like, hey man, well, have you considered Fresco? Show them a sample and go from there, and a color chart. And I think part of the challenge is that the newness, you'd think that it's easy to push a new product that's proven and works, but like a lot of people, they haven't done it, they haven't seen
Mm-hmm.
it, the builders haven't seen it, and so there's a challenge there, oddly enough, but it's there. It's up to the drywall guy to really push it,
To push
and
it.
the Nick Boyd at the supply yard, he's a fan, but those drywall guys got to push it to their builders. You've got to sell it. I do it in Albuquerque because I cut my teeth many years just selling it and selling it and selling it, and now I'm the Fresco guy in Albuquerque.
See, you make a perfect point. Now, me going back on my own, if you work for some of these companies, you gotta use the product that they want to use,
Sure.
and they're not selling this stuff. Another thing is if you turn around and see, I paint also. And
Okay.
I can give them an option.
There you
If
go.
they say, hey, John, I want you to come hang tape, texture, and paint. I'm like, hold on a second. What if I show you this product and this is what you want to do? And that's what I hope that I'm able to do and push this. Because I used to do it with diamond, with veneer when I had my business. I think I could push it now with this stuff. And it's just, I got my son. My son's only been he's been doing this for 5 or 6 months now. He's walking around on stilts, hawking trowel, doing lids, you know, and he's loving it, you know, and he's like, Dad, let's get more Fresco jobs.
There was a job, 5,000 square foot house, this massive house in Albuquerque. I knew the guy. I had done a plaster patch for him, a small plaster patch, $500. He was happy with it. Got lots of money. He's building this beautiful home, and he's like, hey, I want some accent walls. A friend of mine referred me, and I went in, and, you know, I'm selling the product, but we also do the service too. And I'm like, well, I'll charge you a premium. We're $450 a square foot. And, you know, I have a $1,600 minimum, you know, I'll come in and do accent walls for you all day. But, you know, teach a man to fish. I was like, you could take this product and you could show the drywall guys how to do it, and they happen to be interested. The guy's bought over 45 color packs now. He's like, awesome. 8 gallons deep, and those guys are doing it. And I'll walk into the job, and he's kind of nitpicking and stuff and wondering about certain things. And I'm like, look at this house. This looks like Venetian plaster. I mean, these guys knocked it out of the park. It looks phenomenal. It looks like high-end Venetian plaster. They even figured out a way to do the outside, because on outside corners can be tricky because the metal flashes. You have to build them up. They're using an outside corner tool and floating all of the outside corners preliminary. And
that's how I do it.
They're floating the inside corners too. That never even occurred to me. That's
the process of interior plaster also, even when you do bullnose or everything.
Okay, all right.
Corners, you run everything first, your corners,
that makes sense.
Your bullnose, and build those corners up. Then you come into it and build it. Then you don't have any mishaps with the corners. So,
right.
Great. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
There's some
and a lot of times
there.
What we did with that plaster is we would turn around and, like, whatever color we were using, we would go get like a pint paint and turn around and paint the corners, just in case they did come, you know, where you didn't put enough mud on there or whatever.
Sure.
And then you can turn around, and then we would corner tool it, do what we had to do, and then move on. But that works. My Fresco too.
That works too. Or like we'll do the Fresco Harmony, build up the corners, and then like maybe the little bit of metal will flash, and you can go back and like just touch it up with a match paint.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that too. I mean, that's like plaster too. I mean, you know, and I'm not trying to be messed up to the homeowners or like GCs or superintendents. If they get this product, this is an imperfect product. This isn't level 5 paint. You know, and I tell everybody that. I'm like, if you want an imperfect product, do level 5, no texture, and paint it.
Right.
That's the only way you're going to get something within 95.9 or 99.
Well, if the drywaller is good.
Good. Yeah, because you could get some level 5 and say, oh yeah, it's ready, but it's only ready for wallpaper. So no, I get it.
Right. Now stop me if I'm wrong. The numbers that I've ran, you know, doing hang finish Fresco Harmony versus hang finish paint and texture, I'm right around 20% to 30% over the paint and texture cost. Like, am I out of line there? Would you say that's accurate?
No, because that's right. And I always tell the homeowner or the GCs, like, hey, you're going to have to, if you want that, that's what happens is you're about that percentage, and you're going to have to eat the painting of the doors and the painting of the jambs, case, and base. That's what you're going to be out of.
And I'll even say, like, you know, you run texture in like your closets and pantry too.
Correct.
You can texture those and paint them, no big deal. And sometimes those are easier to paint because they'll put the shelving and cabinetry systems in the pantry closets first, and then they'll shoot the whole thing.
Correct.
And that's super efficient. So you could have the painter do that, and the painter might get pissed off because he's losing out. he's losing out, but who gives a shit about the painter, right?
Yeah, they do.
Like,
It's perfect because I'm the painter sometimes too. So
right.
it's like,
Done.
yeah, it's like, what do you want me to do? Do you want a fresco or do you want a plaster? What do you want to do? And then I try to not try to get people into doing plaster because it holds me on a job for so long.
Okay.
And I stay there for so long when you run plaster. And people don't, like I was saying before, it's like it just takes so long to do when you're doing plaster compared to like if you were to hand texture or do fresco. And then you're cutting out the paint all in
Right.
one. So
Now,
yeah.
where's your price point on like a plaster that you do versus Fresco Harmony? You're coming in like half the price, or is it hard to decipher because you're wrapping in the paint cost and the
So
texture cost?
So I imagine it's the same way with you as I go by ceiling height and detail also. You
Okay.
know, if something's like really high and then I have to do something that is like a bunch of detail, or if it's a ceiling, a tray ceiling or something, then I have to charge accordingly. I'm around if I was to do in Montrose, because your market, it seems like your market in Albuquerque is a little about the same as Montrose, maybe a little bit better. I'm assuming.
It's pretty depressed down here, but it
Is
is in
it?
Montrose too.
Montrose is too. It's about, like I said, it's about the same.
Okay.
I would say if you were around to bid something at 450 a square foot, you could still do diamond veneer at 450 a foot. You know,
Okay. I'm on the high end of Fresco because
but
that's
hold
all I
on a
do.
sec. You're saying hang tape and fresco at
Now,
450?
if I was hang, finish, and Fresco Harmony for a 5,000 square foot house and I can double my profit margin, I might be 450 at that price point as well. So, but if I'm just doing Fresco and I'm doing a small amount or a room or whatever, I'm coming into an existing house, I'm still at 450.
But Nick, that's a real good price point because if you're not second, are you second coating? Are you going full second coat?
Yeah, you can tape two coat, definitely two coat the corner bead. Um, but no sanding and then no texture and no paint.
And no, I was gonna say no texture, no paint, and no sanding. I mean, you're right there,
Yeah,
and I don't want to say nothing. I didn't want to tell anybody this, but
sure.
um, I've taped and one coated fresco before and put
Yeah,
two coats of fresco on, and it's flat.
I have too. And
And it's
but
flat.
not the corner bead on your butts and bands. I had a job and I've mentioned it before where we did a ceiling and the drywall guys, because we don't do drywall guy, we're prima donnas, just me and Jack.
Mm-hmm.
We just, we're the specialty Fresco guys coming in, after the drywall. They were dragging their feet. They had put one coat on with the box, looked super ugly. Just one coat down either side of the butts with the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
box. You got Christmas trees, the whole works.
The flag, saluting the flag.
I blew it. I blew it out with Fresco on a lit ceiling. Couldn't see shit. Gone. Everything.
Yeah, I mean, and ceilings, I think ceilings, but like you said, metal too. Sometimes that metal's deep. It's just the way the framing is, and you do have to fill it twice, and then run your
Yeah.
two coats of fresco. But like you said, on the ceiling and stuff, oh yeah, you could definitely get away. I know you could get away with it. I've done it before.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
looks good, man. It looks
It
really
looks
good.
it looks fine. Yeah. So you're
Yep.
saving a ton of time and no sanding. You're saving a ton of time on the finish. That's an interesting price point. It's an interesting proposition, and what we're talking about really is a new way of looking at drywall, looking at walls. It's not smooth, it's imperfect smooth. If you shine a light down it, there's undulations, but they're consistent, and it doesn't look as ugly as a skip trowel or an orange peel. And even for the smooth wall guys up in Canada and
Mm-hmm.
beyond, that East
Mm-hmm.
Coast, they just do smooth finish. They've got to wrap their brain around it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth.
And like I was saying, that just goes back to doing like level 5 or plaster. I mean, how long do you want to stay on one job doing that finish when you can do this finish and it still comes out good? It still looks good. If you're from back
Yeah.
east and you want smooth wall, you want level 5, then they're stuck in it. That's what they'll get. That's what they want. But this fresco,
It blows me away. And they don't really understand texture, but why is like ugly ass broquet finish on a ceiling, okay, but then like I'll get pushback from like a slightly imperfect Fresco Harmony finish. It doesn't make any sense. It's like, why is this okay, this ugly ass finish, and then but this one you're going to challenge me on,
I
you know?
think well, I've seen that before. I've been like slap brush. I
Yeah,
like saying that stuff has been around since like the late '60s and the '70s, and I haven't done one probably like in maybe 12, 13 years, and now it's starting to make a comeback, and I'm going like, why? I mean,
yeah,
I I see it on drywall stuff now, and I'm like, why would you even want that in your house? But at the same time, I've I've done a hand texture with the fresco too. I mean, it
sure.
looks good. It looks good. I mean, you could I do it with cat faces here and there where it looks like,
Yep,
hey, this dimes here and there's a little bit texture here, and you get more modeling, and then when you go to put the clear coat the clear coat over it, the gloss, it looks
yep.
good. I mean, there's so many
There's a
different things
dude
to
from
do.
Idaho that does, all of his Fresco Harmony is like, he's like doing like a skip trowel on the first coat, and then he's doing like he's just got his own way, and he says the clients like that better than the way that I do it, and I've just figured out a way that kind of works: heavy base coat, tight second coat, seal it. But that is not like there's so many ways to skin a cat here, to use the cat
And,
face
and
analogy.
yeah. I mean, but that's always the thing. And like I said, you get on the internet, and you see these guys on here, and you're like, oh, I do this better than you, or this is better than you, and it's like,
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I mean, I've worked with hundreds of drywallers, over the
Yeah.
course of being on like commercial jobs and stuff, on hospitals and prisons and stuff like that. And these guys have a lot to offer. There's a lot to offer from learning from somebody that I I had already like 10 or 12 years in the trade, and I was learning from a guy that had maybe 4 years in the trade, and I learned something off of him that I've never
Sure.
seen before. That he learned from somebody, back east that
Oh
was a
yeah.
hand finisher, and I was broken in as learning. You learn the hands and knives first, but I was always around. We were around tools all the time,
Yeah.
so it was a cool thing to learn from a hand finisher. And I'm like, there's a lot of things that people have to offer, and you're doubting them because it's not the way that you do it. Everybody's a sponge, man. They learn this stuff is cool. I mean, if you're banging on somebody all the time, that's bad. Like I said, the bad thing is though, is these guys get on YouTube and they teach these homeowners how to do this stuff, and this is not the way. It's not the way. And then they have guys like us come in, and they're wondering why is this blistered? Why is it costing so much? Well, you got blisters everywhere. You got shiners on your corner bead. Your corner bead's
Yeah.
twisted.
Yeah.
Well, he told me that's the way it's supposed to look. Well, that it's not supposed to look that way. And then these guys are
Sure.
making YouTube videos, and then they're having millions of likes, and you're going, where is the guy that's actually doing this stuff halfway right? And
Yeah.
then those are the guys that get on there and say, and they're not getting no likes, no nothing, because Joe Schmo's doing it this way. He's
Yeah.
saying some funny stuff in there, and then he's getting likes. When I saw your YouTube videos, I'm like, man, I got to check this guy out. Because it came across my feed, Fresco Harmony, and I'm like,
Interesting.
it was, I'm like, what is this stuff? This is like, and Nick, I've tried for years to put pigment in mud,
Sure. Sure. Well,
and it never worked.
this is
It,
interesting though. Why,
it
like
never
what?
worked.
Because I mean, you get people too. Oh, he's just dumping color in the mud. I mean, yes, that's part of it, but
Part of it.
there's a lot more to it that I had to figure out. Through trial and error, lots of failures and stuff like that.
Yep.
What happened? Why do you think that you trying to put color into mud didn't work? What were the reasons?
I was I was trying to put the straight will. I would have vials left over from interior plaster jobs,
Okay.
and I would like try to do the same thing. Instead of putting the pigment into the bucket, I was trying to do the same thing with the water thing, like I did with plaster. I
Okay.
would try to put that in a 5-gallon bucket of water, put it in there, box it up, and then start putting my color in there and mix it up with the water. And my colors would never get dark. It would be like a
Sure.
a hint of color in white
Okay.
drywall mud, you know? So it
Did you
was,
ever use paint? Did you ever like
I
try using?
did. I
Yeah.
did. I've used paint. We've used paint one time and it was,
Yeah. Doesn't
it
work.
was a mess. It was a mess.
Yeah.
It looked like garbage, man. It was like, you know, and I showed the thing to the lady before, and we're like putting the pigment in, and then we would get it where we, like you guys do, we'd put it in the hawk. We'd put the pigment in the hawk and the drywall mud. We'll just try to mix it up just a little bit and then smear it on the wall. And it's like, oh man, it's going to get that effect. It never did. It was like, it was streaky, and then it was like really dark. It looked like an ice cream sundae is what it looked like. It didn't
So
look very.
why do you think for you that the Fresco worked? Just
I I always, I'm the type of guy that's always thinking about like, what can I do to be real cool, a product to be real cool and put it on the wall
sure.
and get it done at a certain time where I can get this done, this amount of footage done, doing this, and not, how would I say it? And not being on there too long and turning around and trying to get on to the next job.
Okay.
Fresco does that. Fresco is combining all this stuff because plaster, you can't do it with plaster. You can't. You're on a project for at least 3 to 4 weeks. And if sometimes you're on a project for, I've been on plaster projects 6 to 8 months on big, huge jobs. So
would you say the color chart is extremely helpful?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And it's spot on.
That takes some of the headache out. It's like, here, choose a color.
And I tell people that, and they ask, that's the first thing they ask me. This is in the drywall mud. Is the color going to be the same? I'm like, yeah, whatever you see right there is pretty much your, and I tell people this though too. I said, hey, you got to understand something. Your lighting is everything.
Yeah.
When something's not monotone, it's a big, huge mood ring. You're getting different colors, different shades. If you have dimmers on your lights, this stuff is going to be different colors all parts of the times of the day.
Well, and in my contract, I put, there might be slight, variation from sample to surface based on lighting, other colors present. People will be judging the wall, and you've got gray floors all over, just concrete. Flooring hasn't gone in yet, and they're judging the color on all the wall. I'm like, look at all of the reflection you're getting off of the gray floor. So other colors present, applicator, and lighting. Yes. So when you're getting lighting pouring in your house, you're going to have these variables from sample to surface. But I also put, however, we will do everything possible to ensure a consistent transition from sample to surface. Some of that coddling with the client is very challenging. Choosing colors, drywall guys don't have to do that. They just do drywall. They don't have to get into the, so that's a new aspect.
That's a good idea. I've never done that. I've always thought of it in the back of my mind, but I never thought of it about putting it into a contract and make it.
It's on my invoice. It's just a simple thing. You sign it. It's like, hey, this is going to look the way it looks. We're going to make it, I'll hold the sample up to the wall at the end. And if it looks like the sample, well, then we're on the same page. I can't guarantee that you're going to like it. There's no guarantee. This is art. I mean, what I mean?
And I try to tell people too, they always like, well, can you put it on a sample on a board? I said, and this is what I've learned doing plaster. I've always put I'll pick up a good sized closet on the back of the wall, and I'll go in and I'll put the sample on the back of a closet wall.
Okay.
Or somewhere, because it's big. Then because you've seen it before. You've probably seen it with texture. Why don't this look like this over here, like you showed me on this 2x2, 3x3 plaster or texture sample? And it's the motion's different. You're going to get different motions.
Well, and also going from a small, like our sample boards are 16 by 21, going from that to a 40-foot by 20-foot wall is that's a different animal. And it might look subtle on a sample, but when you get it to an enormous wall, you're going to have plenty of color variation. you don't want that little sample to be so busy, because when it translates to a larger area, you're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. You don't want for the walls to take over the house. You want for them to be this beautiful backdrop.
Mm-hmm. But I do tell everybody though, Nick, it's the most footage in the house is your walls and ceiling. Make them look, when I see these people, they're like, oh, I'm gonna paint the wall flat white.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna do white over here, and it's like, don't you want to liven it up a little bit? I mean, they go in and they're like, oh, this is what I want. I want it to be all white, semi smooth, and it's like, man, just put some color in here, put some life in here, and that stuff, Fresco, it just does that.
Yeah, it's simple. It's simple to sell an accent wall. This is a fantastic conversation. I mean, a lot of the interviews that I do, we don't talk a lot about Fresco, but you with your plaster background, it's just so fascinating to sort of dive in. I'm not even really biased. I mean, I use Fresco just because it's efficient and it's cost effective, and it's the only thing that I've done. I'm selling it, so that's what I use. But having the plaster background is fantastic. It's great to talk to somebody who's sort of done both and is open to sort of different possibilities. Somebody wants Venetian plaster, you can do it. You also show them a sample of Fresco. Maybe, it's half the price. They can judge for themselves and go ahead with it. But you're offering whatever they want. It's just another feather in your cap. It's pretty cool. And you have a sweet color, Galterio steel, which is extremely popular now. I don't know how that happened, but it's a very popular color. It's a cool color. We did it in Columbia, up at Columbia headquarters. We did Galterio steel in their conference room. They love it. So Chad Hesher out of Ohio, he's geared up to do 2 back-to-back Galterio steel projects. Awesome. So the color's actually really gained. Itchy Man Cam has used it. So it's gaining in popularity. It's a great color. It's really fun to name colors. When somebody comes to me with a custom color, it's fun to name the color after the person, and it's kind of like something special that we've that I've done for many years. Even the signature color series is all based after clients that have Fresco Harmony in their home. One thing I ask all of the interviewees is a pearl of wisdom that you could bestow upon the drywall community. What would that be?
Wow. That's a good question. What would that be? Bestow. You know what? I'm going to be honest with you. And everybody says, oh, when somebody says that, be honest. I wish we could get more young people to do this trade, and maybe even have trade schools so we can learn how to do this stuff right and do it where drywallers get such a bad name. Yeah. And it's just, I love the trade. I've tried to get away from it. It's given me major anxiety before. Yeah. Man, all I can say is, man, if you're a drywaller out there, just keep putting the mud to the wall, man. And just show everybody what you can do, because drywallers are, like I said, drywallers are unique bunch of individuals, and that's what we are as individuals. Everybody has different ways to how to do this stuff, and if we can all get together on forums like this and kind of hey, man, let's see what you do, let's see what he does, let's see what I do, and we can all get together and kind of put our brains together. There's really nothing a drywaller can't do. So, you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I lost your audio, dude.
What happened?
I have no clue. That's so weird.
You went all this time and nothing happened, but we got towards the end and it did it. So
I know.
It's time to go.
You were just at the tail end of your pearl of wisdom. But anyways, I wanted to call you back on the phone so that we could at least say goodbye. Thank you so much for being on the Drywall podcast today, man. It was awesome.
Man, Nick, I appreciate it, man. I had a great time, and I maybe in a year or so, 6 months, I could do it again.
Yeah, well, I mean, we just went to Montrose. I hung out with It's Cali, super cool guy, Ernesto, really cool dude. He did some walls, and his guys were stucco guys. They were like all over it, man. So you might have a little bit of competition there. I don't know.
Oh yeah, but I always like competition. It's never
well, and they're cool dudes. If you haven't met him,
I actually worked with a couple of those guys.
Okay.
On jobs, like maybe 2 or 3 months ago. I worked with a couple of those guys that worked for those guys. So they worked with us for a little bit. So,
he's a super cool dude. Cool guys, man. We hung out with Nick, from the Drywall Supply Yard. Great guy, But yeah, cool, man. Next time I'm in Montrose. I mean, you guys are only 6 hours, I think 6 hours away from me here. So, and also if you ever want to come down and do Fresco Harmony training, come on, man. Just come down, hang out.
I'll take you up on that. I'll go down there and do that.
Hell yeah. We're doing jobs all the time, even if it's like, a friend's wall or a house or something, or, the place where I'm staying or what. There's always jobs to do down here, man. So set it up and come down and we'll hang out.
Yeah, I'd love that. I appreciate that, Nick. That'd be great.
All right, buddy. I can't believe this audio. What in the world? But hey, it was awesome, man. We'll talk soon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Have a great night.
All right, you too, buddy. Talk to you.
Bye.
Special thanks to John Galterio of Creative Wall Finishes for being with us on the Drywall podcast today. I appreciate your time. Such a cool conversation. Guests of the Drywall podcast will receive a sweet swag bucket from our friends up north at CSR. CSR, supplying all of your drywall needs in Canada and beyond. Check them out at csrbuilding.com for more information. If you'd like to be a guest of the Drywall podcast, it's as easy as emailing me at info@frescoharmony.com. Call me up. Let's chat. Let's talk some drywall. I would love to hear from you. The Drywall podcast in the month of August and a little beyond was brought to you by the Drywall Supply Yard in Montrose, Colorado, also supplying your drywall needs, and they may have a little bit of Fresco Harmony if you go and check them out. Thank you so much for joining me on the Drywall podcast today. I hope all of you have an amazing Friday, and remember, keep drywalling.